Hello everyone and welcome to another ride overview. Today we're not going to talk about a roller coaster, but instead I'm going to put one of the best water rides into the spotlight, which is the splash boats. The splash boats is most well known for its massive capacity of 16 guests per boat, but it also has a few other great tricks up its sleeve. Let's first talk about that massive capacity, because it's quite something to behold. The splash boats is one of the rides where the number of vehicles is not based on the length of the station, but instead on the length of the track. This is very useful as it means that you don't have to bother with a long station. To get the maximum of 31 boats you need a track length of a bit over 700 meters. I can't give you an exact number as the calculation for the number of boats is slightly different than the calculation of the length of the track. For example, these two tracks are both exactly the same length, but one gets 30 boats while the other one gets 31. If your splash boat has 31 boats, it is able to accommodate up to 496 guests, which is quite a lot. This makes it quite useful as guest storage in a crowded park. If your ride isn't too long, it can also make a lot of money. This design has a maximum throughput of a little over 3000 guests per hour, and when it's under 5 months old you can charge more than $16 for it. One of the reasons that you can charge so much for it is the high excitement rating of the splash boats. In fact, the splash boats can have one of the highest excitement ratings in the entire game. Not only can it get a very high excitement rating, it is also super easy to do, as long as you have the money to raise the land. A simple design like this with a 97 meter drop and 8 other small drops already gets over 11 excitement. It's not a very good design for anything other than getting a lot of excitement, but if excitement is your goal, then this is the way to go. If you take this to the absolute extreme, you can get over 17 excitement, which is completely and utterly ridiculous. The only way to get even more excitement without glitches is to heavily abuse airtime on certain roller coasters, which could still be considered an exploit. The very tall drops lead to incredibly high speeds, but you don't have to be afraid that that causes any issues. The splash boats cannot fly off the track, and it also doesn't record any G-forces, so you can take those turns at any speed you like. It also cannot crash, so a boat slamming into another boat at 150 km per hour is completely fine. Let's bring it back down to earth a bit and talk about a few more practical issues. You may have noticed that in the shot of the splash boats with 11 excitement, the boats on the lift hill are not evenly spaced at all. This is because heavier boats go slower on these kinds of lift hills that consist of rollers that roll the vehicle upwards. This is the point where I would show you a comparison between two identical designs, where one was tested with empty boats and the other one with full boats. The problem is that something goes very wrong with the calculation of the ride time of the splash boats with full boats, as it gives a ride time of less than half of the one with the empty boats. When I measured the ride time with a stopwatch myself, I got 1 minute and 36 seconds for the empty boats and 2 minutes and 22 seconds for the full boats. This shows that full boats are definitely much slower on lift hills. They do make up a little bit after the drop as they lose speed less quickly, but that's only a tiny amount and doesn't make much of a difference. Because some guests are heavier than others, boats can catch up to each other on long lift hills, as each boat has a slightly different weight and thus a slightly different speed. You can avoid this by building a ride with two stations, one at the top where guests get on the ride and one at the bottom where guests get off the ride. The boats still have to go up the slow lift hill, but they will be quite a bit faster now as they're always empty when doing so, which increases the number of guests per hour that the ride can process. The splash boat has one stat requirement, which is that it needs a drop of at least 4 meters. This is surprisingly low for a ride that has access to steep track pieces. I would have expected a drop height requirement of at least 9 meters. In terms of special elements, the splash boat doesn't really get any. In fact, the only turns that it has available are the medium turns and S-bends, which sometimes can be quite limiting. Now it's time to take a look at a few efficient ride designs. These are generally fairly cheap, as all water rides are quite cheap to build, but they won't be super compact because you only get medium-sized turns. I have 4 designs for you in this overview, which you can find a download link to in the description. The first design is the smallest design without any stat penalties as usual, which is yours for less than $1,000. It's a nice design if you need absolute efficiency on your splash boats, but it's not really a proper splash boat as it lacks a steep drop. Design number 2 is more like it, which has a steep drop followed by 2 tiny drops to get a little bit higher stats. If I saw this in your park, I would say that yes, that is a proper splash boat and not just built for pure efficiency, even if that still was the intention. The next design is a Mobius design, which is really interesting. The calculation for how many boats you get takes the full length into account, so you get roughly twice as many boats on this design as on the previous design. With the extra bonuses from synchronization and track interaction, this is a really efficient design with a very high throughput. You may have trouble getting enough guests to constantly fill all the boats though. The last and biggest design is one that I used as an example earlier. It can support the maximum of 31 boats and is about as compact as it can be. Because the station is on the short side, you can easily build a bunch of these right next to each other. This design is quite useful for guest storage if your park is overcrowded and you need to get some guests off the paths. It will of course also make a good amount of money, as we saw earlier. And that's it for the splash boats. It's a powerful water ride with a high capacity and an extremely high excitement rating if you build it right. If you liked this video and learned something new, consider giving this video a like or leave a comment. You can also subscribe or follow me on Twitch. Thank you all for watching and I will see you in the next video.